Well, welcome. Good evening, and welcome to the third class. Oh, sorry. I think that's me.
Oh.
The cloud cover. The lake water is usually about.
Sorry about that. I didn't turn him off properly. I'm sorry. So welcome to our third night. We're excited to hear from Sierra Club's Dashiell Leeds tonight about the nuts and bolts of interacting with cities on environmental advocacy. We also have Eileen McLaughlin tonight to present our first case study, which is the Ravenswood Business District Specific Plan in East Palo Alto. We'll also hear from representatives of 2 community-based organizations in East Palo Alto. Then I'll introduce our first advocacy activity before we break into small groups. You should all have gotten an email with links to sign up for one of 3 different site visits. The East Palo Alto site visit and the Point Mulade site visit in Richmond are both full. If you're interested in being on a wait list, please email me. There are some spots remaining for the Mare Island site visit at the end of October. But even if you're not going to this Saturday's site visit in East Palo Alto, you can follow it in real time on Zoom. I'll be sending out a Zoom link tomorrow, so watch for that. You can follow in real time and ask questions. Or if that doesn't work for you, a recording, I will send out a recording of the event. So please watch for a Zoom link on Friday. So with that, I'd like to ask Dash to introduce himself and to share his presentation now.
Thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. My name is Dashiell Leeds. You can call me Dash.
Excuse
me.
Dash, just one moment. Susan, are we then having a panel discussion with the East Palo Alto?
Yeah, I did say we have community representatives, so we'll introduce them.
Okay, so basically this would be a great case study to see how we can work on advocacy. That's great. Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Dash.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'm our staff conservation assistant for the Loma Prieta chapter. I'll start my presentation here. So I've been an environmental advocate for over 3.5 years, a year and a half as a volunteer, and about 2 years professionally for the Sierra Club. So I'm just here to share some of the day-to-day things, tips and tricks that help me out as I go about doing advocacy work. And hopefully this will be helpful. So here's what we're going to be going over. First is my sort of pre-meeting checklist that I like to go through before I engage in a city. We'll talk a little bit about finding meetings and agendas, how to navigate agenda documents to locate information, how to locate city documents in other places on the website, and how to search through municipal code language. I'm going to give some tips about how to improve your research experience, tips for reading through large documents. We're also going to go through how to join public meetings through Zoom and how you can use agendas to track the progress of a meeting and plan for your public comment. So first, this is my pre-meeting checklist that I like to go through. So first, when I'm deciding when to engage is, of course, to locate the agenda. And that way I can confirm the meeting day, time, and most importantly, the content of the meeting to make sure that what I want to advocate for is relevant to what's being discussed at the meeting. I then look at the agenda and the city website to find all relevant documents for the meeting, things such as staff reports, memorandums, and other relevant documents. And then using all that information, I can plan my strategy around the decision being made that day based on the documents and what's in the agenda. And with that strategy, I can communicate ahead of time with my champion. Joe Simidian has called this person a floor manager, and they're the elected official who you've talked to ahead of time, who's sympathetic to your cause and is willing to make motions and take action on your behalf. And it's also important, in addition to preparing your champion, to try and prepare other key members of the decision-making body to make sure that when your champion, sticks their neck out for you and makes that motion, that the other members of that body will vote in support. It's also important to communicate with your allies ahead of time to provide the talking points and resources that you've gathered from your research. And then also to prepare your own talking points based on everything above. And the last point on here is it's completely okay if you are missing any or all of these points. I think a lot of the experienced advocates here can think of many times where we found out about a meeting at the last minute, or for one reason or another, we're not fully prepared, but we have to hop in and engage anyways. And it's totally okay to fly by the seat of your pants sometimes, but if you have time to prepare, it's always best to prepare. So next I'm gonna share my screen and go through, I'm actually gonna go to a city website and we're gonna see what it looks like to find a meeting and an agenda. So I'll hop out of my PowerPoint here, go to my web browser. As you can see, I've already Googled San Jose City Council agendas. This is what I do. I just Google jurisdiction name and then agendas. So I just click on the first link, City Council agendas and minutes. And yeah, you may, each city has its own website and it's structured in a different way. So there's no one size fits all for finding this. So I generally just kind of explore around. I will click through until I get to the page that I want to find. So I'm going to keep clicking through council agendas 2019 to present. That sounds relevant. And here we are. This page looks very familiar to me. And this is the Legislar page. Most jurisdictions have a page that looks very, very similar to this. This is where all of the meetings, both future, present, and past, are stored. Some super old meetings may not be up here. But this is a really, really awesome tool. So I'm going to go through some key parts of this, and this should be universal for most cities. There are some small distinctions, but hopefully this will be useful for almost any city you look at or county. The first is body name up here. I have city council selected, but if I hit this drop-down menu, you can see I can select all sorts of different commissions, committees, and if I scroll up to the top, I can even select all meeting bodies. And that's if I want to look at all meetings across all of the different entities on this list here. So you can really specify what you want to look at. You can also go to the date. So I have this year selected, but you can look at last week, last month, or even previous years, or even future periods in time. So these are ways you can sort of specify what you're looking for. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And there's two links I want to highlight here. Let's take a look at this, this meeting here. So there's two links. One is meeting details, and another one is agenda. Now these links actually do some very similar stuff. So if I click on meeting details, what I'm going to get is a digital copy of the agenda. So you can scroll through here, and each of these hyperlinks on the left, that's an agenda item. So each of these is its own agenda item. And let's just click on one randomly here. I click on the agenda item. This isn't a super informative one, but usually here in the title, you'll see hyperlinks to documents, maybe staff reports. I can go to this tab here that says reports, and then I can download the links here. So I'd really recommend just playing around with this tool in your spare time, just looking at meetings, even if you're not interested in that particular meeting, just to get used to finding where the different documents are located. It's kind of like a scavenger hunt. It's different every time, and sometimes it's different depending on the city or how the staff people like to, file their data away. But this is the sort of interface that you'll be exploring here. So I'll hop back to my PowerPoint. And next, we're going to go through navigating agendas themselves to locate information. So I showed you the web page version of the agenda. And as you can see from that previous web page, there was also a PDF agenda link. I'll go back to it really quick right here. Let's go back, go back one more, and one more. Here we go. So it says meeting details here and agenda here. So if you click on this agenda link, it's going to download a PDF of the agenda. I'm not actually going to download it here. I'm just going to open up a pre-downloaded agenda that I have. This is just a miscellaneous upcoming City of Cupertino City Council agenda. And you'll see some very similar elements here. This is a pretty short one. Looks like it's just a closed session. Probably not the best example. So I'll actually go to the City Council agenda. Here it is, it's downloaded. And here we are, San Jose City Council agenda. I'm gonna scroll down until I start seeing agenda items. Here we go. So here's each of the different agenda items. You can see there's links to memorandums, resolutions. So here's where you can find relevant documents to your agenda item. And this is also a really useful document because the order of this agenda is the order of the progression of the meeting. So you can use this to time your public comments. So again, just some key points here is that there's no one size fits all for this. You kind of just have to poke around and explore to find what you want. And so next I'll go into another really useful tool, which is locating city documents and municipal code language. So I'm going to go back to my web browser. So let's type in City of San Jose municipal code. This is generally what I do. First link here, city ordinances. Let's click on that. So cities will have ordinances sometimes listed as links on a specific web page, but there's actually two more tools you can use. One is the search bar. Pretty much every jurisdiction will have a search bar on their website. You can type in keywords, it'll bring up previous meetings, it'll bring up documents, but there's one more tool I want to show you. So let's go back to my search here. Right here, this link down here, which is the code of ordinances. When I click on this, I should get a Municode library. Pretty much every jurisdiction I've looked at has a Municode library. And this is amazing. This is literally the municipal code of San Jose. I can search for any keyword. Let's just type in tree. And then here it's starting to show me all of the different specific areas in the municipal code where the word tree is listed. So if you're ever curious, like what is the city's policy regarding X thing, you can go to the Municode search engine and type in your word and just explore around and see what's up there. Okay, so let's say you've done your research on the agenda, you've downloaded 300 pages of giant documents that are relevant to your agenda item. What do you do with that? So a couple tips is research is always better with friends. I would highly recommend putting your information on a shared Google Doc. Maybe you can divvy up the research among multiple people, be responsible for different sections. Control F is magic. That is when you hit Control F on a document, sometimes it's Apple F if you're using an Apple computer, that opens up the search window and you can search the text of the document. It is a godsend for huge documents that would take forever to read through manually. And then just one little tip when you're communicating with your allies is be sure to distinguish between the in-document page number and the PDF page number, because those don't always line up and it can be confusing for folks sometimes. All right, now this is probably the easiest part, joining public meetings via Zoom. Pretty much every city council agenda document will have a hyperlink Zoom link that'll look like this. You can copy paste it, you can click on it, and it'll take you right to the meeting. So very easy. A couple things I like to do is I double check my audio device to make sure I have it set up properly. And I also double check my Zoom name and profile photo just to be sure that I'm representing myself as I'd like to the city. You know, if you have like a goofy name or profile picture, you may not want to use that in a city council agenda, unless that's your style, which is totally cool. But yeah, I usually like to double check everything just to make sure I'm presenting myself properly. And then lastly, I highly recommend using the agenda as your guide for tracking the progress of a meeting. And within that, there are some terms that are helpful to be aware of. So let's go back. So one of them is oral communications. Sometimes it's called verbal communications. Sometimes it's called public comment, depends on the city. But this is basically a time where you can speak on items that are not on the agenda. So you can bring up literally anything you want. But if you bring up something that is on the agenda, you will likely get cut off by the mayor. And the agenda will provide guidance. They will say, this is the time where you can talk about items not on the agenda, just in case you're unclear. There's also a term called consent calendar. And I won't go too much into this, but long story short, this is a part of the agenda where you have a bunch of different items, but they're all bundled together. They're not discussed individually, and they're all approved with one vote. It happens all at once. There's situations where items can get pulled off of that calendar to get discussed individually, but we don't need to go too much into that. So lastly, tracking the progress of your meeting using the agenda. There's sort of a standard order of operations for every agenda item. So usually first, there's a staff presentation sort of discussing the issue at hand. Then there's an opportunity for the council or the decision-making body to ask clarifying questions. They're actually not allowed to provide opinions here, but sometimes they do anyways. After that is public comment. This is your opportunity to engage and deliver your public comment, usually about 2 to 3 minutes in length. But there will be a future presentation about how to deliver the most effective public comment possible. And then after public comments, this is the opportunity for the city council members to provide their opinions, to deliberate, make motions, and vote on the item. Now, let's say you have a super long meeting, your agenda item 10.2, you're just way late, and you have a lot of people who are interested in the meeting. It just doesn't make sense to have all 30 people or however many people you have all tracking the agenda. So it's usually best to assign just one person who's willing to commit their time to follow the meeting closely and can text or message everyone in your group, maybe email them when it's, maybe the agenda item before your item. So people have time to get to their computers and prepare. And one little point that's caught me off guard before is that the order of agenda items is actually subject to change. Sometimes the mayor can make a motion to move an item ahead on the agenda. That's happened where an item I thought would be heard in 6 hours actually gets bumped to the top of the agenda, maybe because it's controversial or there's a lot of public comment. It's a rare circumstance, but it's important to keep in mind. And that's why it's always important to have one person who's tracking the meeting from start to finish, just so your whole group doesn't get caught off guard. And that's basically it. Just some assorted tips and tricks for how to prepare for meetings, how to navigate them. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. And if we're running low on time, you can always email your questions to me at this email address as well. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you, Dash. Sometimes you have to be very persistent to get your input into these meetings. Case in point, there was a meeting last night, a community meeting put on by a consultant in EastPaloAlto that had to be started and restarted several times, which was not good, but well over 100 participants, which was really great. So speaking of EastPaloAlto, next up is Eileen McLaughlin, and she's going to give us background on our first case study. So please introduce yourself, Eileen, and take it away.
I'm Eileen McLaughlin, and I am a longtime advocate for our wetlands, the Don Edwards Refuge, and working with projects in the South Bay. And I have worked mostly with Citizens Committee to complete the refuge in that time, but in the last couple of years, Sierra Club established a new wonderful program, which we call Bay Alive, which I decided it was very worthwhile to put my volunteer time into. So let's go with sharing here. So so hang on here while I do my slideshow deal. All right, here we go. So this is our first case study, and we've heard a lot already about EastPaloAlto tonight. So let's just get going because there's a lot to cover. What we're doing in this city is working with an update of a specific plan, the Ravenswood Business District specific plan. And what you see on the left is a graphic that came from the first and original specific plan in 2013. And in that graphic, it lays out different colors here, different kinds of development. This is the bay and notably loaded toward the bay, but also lots of neighborhoods, lots of single family homes and that fill this whole area and have an effect on what should and shouldn't be there. But we're going into an update, and why is that? Because 4 major proposals have come into the city, and this specific plan, the old one or existing one, would not allow them to happen. You haven't marked in colors on this map the 4 different projects, and so we'll talk about those a bit later, but that's the background for why we're getting into looking at a specific plan. Now, this comes from that community meeting that Susan mentioned, and I plucked this out with a screenshot because it discusses 2 issues besides the bay that are very big deals in this city. Where you look at what the base scenario was, and that's the 2013 standard, it was 1.4 million square feet max for office and R&D. If you go down to scenario 3, their proposed project is 4.15 million square feet, 3 times the volume of office space and of employees and importantly, and into the next column here, traffic. This is a percentage of increase in daily trips on their streets, both in the district, in the neighborhood, and their throughways that as far as their main streets like University Avenue. So going from the base scenario with 4.15 million square feet of development, it's estimated that that would increase traffic by 29% over the standards from before. Now, conversely, if there were to not have that traffic increase, it would take a 57% reduction in these developments in scenario 3 to get it back to the 0% where it was in 2013. So these are major, major changes that have enormous impacts on the city. So what are we doing? Well, we realized early on that we have our understanding of issues, but this is a community where the neighbors live all around this area. They are directly affected, and so we decided we wanted to learn more about the community. We listened to the community members when they did attend meetings. We got in touch with some community groups, and lo and behold, we found that we had a lot of alignment between issues of concern. It's starting with insufficient community outreach. We weren't seeing well-attended meetings when we first started going to the meetings. And they felt that too. This whole business, the community groups put together this flyer to announce the workshop last night, and they put this picture of big, bulky buildings in their midst. So these are concerns because they shade their neighborhoods, they bring in traffic, they do all kinds of ugly things. They worry about the traffic gridlock and hazard. Well, so do we. They want to protect wetlands, they love nature, and they want the access to the bay. And well, that's pretty much aligned with what we'd like to see. A couple of it is here. They have lack of resident appropriate jobs. They have displacement due to gentrification. And a statistic last night was that 25% of the households in EastPaloAlto would be subject to displacement stress. So this is really, for us, we call environmental justice. And this is a city has flooded repeatedly, and they've got sea level rise coming at them. And we're completely aligned with what has to happen to protect them. The only thing that's really missing is on our list is something about the vision for Bay Road. Back in 2013, the community said there should be an activity spine, and this would be the heart of East Palo Alto. Should be a place to relax, and they could stroll down. There's lots of things in that plan that describe what that is. But since that time, the only thing that's really happened along Bay Road that fits that is this EPA Center, which is a brand new vacant building because of the pandemic. And it's to be an art center focused on the developing creativity in youth from preschool to age 25. It would fit into that vision of Bay Road, but not much else has happened. And we don't hear about it. We can't do this without taking a look at what is the East Palo Alto shoreline. It runs from roughly the old Dumbarton Rail Bridge and its right of way down to San Francisco Creek and the county line. In between, there are two conservation agencies taking care of very, very healthy wetlands, and that's Mid-Penn Peninsula Open Space District and its Ravenswood Preserve and the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge. In between, we see Cooley Landing, which is at the very end of Bay Road and has a park that is a park of the city of East Palo Alto. Now, a known but seldom mentioned factor is the need for a sea level rise levee, which is what the Safer Levee project is about. This is a map from a feasibility study for the Safer Levee project, and I circled on here the area of the a suggested alignment or what they came up with for the feasibility study for a sea level rise levee. Now, this is an approximate. It doesn't say whether it's going to be in the mud or on the upland. It doesn't say how it deals with buildings that either exist or land that might be built on. It doesn't talk about where the Bay Trail goes, but it is a factor in all of the developments that are along the shoreline, and there are support in the 2013 plan to actually allowing land to exist along the upland, not in the mud and not filling the bay with mud. Parallel planning processes. It seems quizzical, maybe, but there's a specific plan update process with a certain set of consultants that are doing the analysis that is responsive to changes that these projects suggest might be desired, maybe not. And then there are the major projects that the city planners, because the specific plan already exists from 2013, need to work with these developers who purchase land to develop in this area and maybe try to make them suitable. And then 3 of the projects we're talking about adjoin wetlands. That's these here. We are not going to be talking about the Four Corners project, which is a university in Bay Road, because it's not on the shoreline. Doesn't mean that it's not impactful. It's surrounded on the other 2 sides closely by a neighborhood. And if it's building 8-story buildings there, that's going to be an impact. But we're going to go on to the projects on the shoreline. The first is, it's called the Emerson Collective, or the EPA waterfront. And this is their graphic. And I'd like to point out, just to get our bearings, this is the railroad right of way. This is Bay Road. And outside the footprint here in the wider colors, this is neighborhood where the homes actually that run along here have their backyards right smack dab along this project's boundary. So very close into the neighborhood. And then on the other side and within the site, this kind of blue-green area is marsh. This is marsh that they own. And it's marsh that is continuous in actual fact. Nature doesn't know these little boundary lines running across there. And this is the Ravenswood Open Space Preserve on the other side of the Bay Trail. The buildings themselves, they're talking about 12 buildings, 4 of them 8 stories tall, 2, 7, 2, 6, 2, 5, 2, 4. If I lived here, a 4-story building would look very tall indeed on the other side of my fence. Now there's another outline of the property, and again, the green for the wetlands, but this is from the Bay Trail looking toward the site. So we're looking across, say, there's a channel here that connects to the bay at both ends, is the tidal channel that serves this marsh. We can see back to the foothills, but in between there, where this area centered around where these buildings are now, is where that project would be built, and out extending out to each side a bit, just beyond the marshlands. And but looking carefully at the site too, if you look at the trees, that's where the neighborhood is. Now, the Emerson Collective put out this graphic that if you're a wetland marsh advocate, you really know how to get into under their skin, like mine. This is a grading plan, initial conceptual grading plan, and they show where they want to go out. This would be marsh. They're going to grade it and put terraces out in the marsh. They want to alter the lay of the land, the habitat, and destroy rare, robust, healthy marsh. So with this, we'll talk, there will be talk about impacts of concern as we have with every project. And some of these will be the same with other projects and some will be different. I'll just point them out because when you have that many tall buildings, there's going to be impacts on both the neighborhood and the wetlands. This one infringes on the wetlands. And with tall buildings, there's high potential of bird collisions, plus glare, shade, night lighting, and noise impacts on wildlife, and in this case, on the neighborhood. Its neighbor is the 2020 Bay Road project, which, as its name says, does have a frontage along Bay Road. But these two pictures are meant to be a contrast. The right one is graphic over a photo that they added in. They're 5 8-story buildings rising up and just kind of glaring out over the marsh. This is Bay Road, and this would be the Ravenswood Open Space Preserve to the right. And they're there. I was there last Monday, and this is a picture I took at approximately the same location on Bay Road. We hardly even see a roof line beyond there. And we even can see the mountains still. It's just quite a contrast. Okay, this is a graphic that the city put out of the existing conditions of this site. So you can see the dotted line as the boundary, but we can see then the frontage on Bay Road. And the fact that there is a salvage yard here keeps them from touching the bay there, but they do have two, edges. This one here and here that are touching marshes. So, and if you want to look, this picture below is taken on the Bay Trail somewhere in this area, looking in. But also notice that this is the industrial area. They don't have homes right next door. So the impacts here on homes are a little different, although 8-story buildings will be seen from quite a long distance away. So their buildings will have distinct impacts on wetland habitat. Those same impacts, and I'll talk a little more on the next slide about that they had, but this time on wildlife, not on the neighborhood. And this happens to be a site of this is a site of historic contamination. So that's, these are the issues of this project, but I wanted to point out, because they gave us some nice graphics here, this is their 5 tall buildings. But on this one here, they did a study on where the shadows would fall, and in this case, as the sun is setting, the shadows head out into the marsh, across the Bay Trail, into the Ravenswood Preserve. And this is the kinds of things that tall buildings do when they're near habitats like wetlands. And similarly, those other effects affecting the wetlands, glare from the rising sun, the glare of light noise from a lot of activity here, and bird collisions that could occur if they don't use bird safe design. So there's a lot of impacts that occur on all of these tall buildings near the shoreline. So this is our third project, and it's a cross Bay Road known as Harvest Properties. And they chose to create a graphic that shows this is to be the Bay Trail. And they have built 2 tall buildings, and they plan to put in a 4-story and a 6-story building virtually adjacent to the trail, towering over the trail, closing it in from that open effect that you get there now. Out here is the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge. So in looking at the footprint here, we can see that it has, part of the project has some Bay Road frontage. This is its Bay Trail area. And this is a road we call Weeks that runs right down into the neighborhood. And if you look at the marsh here from the Bay Trail, you'll see it runs right up to the trail. It's a deep marsh. So then we have this last slide on Harvest Properties, and we see the location near Bay Road has an 8-story building, and then another 8-story building, which is somewhat closer to the bay right here. And then when we get down here next to the Bay Trail, we have a 6-story and a 4-story building. In the little fine print, which you cannot read, there are many little details on this original concept that said, oh, and because we own this dark strip here of marshland, we can go out and build things in there. And they are going to build a performance stage for an amphitheater and little things here and little things there. Fortunately, we've had the chance to talk to Harvest, and they decided that they will not touch wetlands. Good. Again, if you look down here, you'll see the neighborhood. So these are why the impacts here, that there are 2 8-story buildings, and they are near the shoreline, and but the infringement without setback of buildings here is equally hazardous. The same kinds of impacts that are occurring on the other sites occur here, but they affect both wildlife and neighborhood here. This site also has some historic contamination to deal with. And for some reason, it's decided it wants to raise the entire site by 5 to 7 feet. I mean, everything on the site, which it's just not really justifiable. So folks, after that little tour, I'm hoping that as many, we have a nice turnout on Saturday, whether it's in person or online. I hope that I'd like you all to keep informed, and we'd love you all to support us. And I've left a link here that is how you get to the Ravenswood the Ravenswood Business District update webpage. And I'll answer questions if we have any time for that, Susan. Otherwise, the chat room is a good place to compile them.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen. That was a very thorough introduction to the proposed development projects. I think some of the questions coming in may be answerable by our panel coming up as well. So I think I'm going to hold the questions, and then we can direct questions to you or the panel afterward. So we're very fortunate to have a representative here tonight from both New Casa and Climate Resilient Communities, both of which are located in East Palo Alto. James will introduce each speaker, and you'll have a chance to ask questions to our guest speakers and Eileen about this particular or these projects by typing questions into the chat. And I've collected a couple, and I know we've answered a couple of the questions already. So I'll ask James to go ahead and introduce our next 2 speakers.
Sure, I'm delighted. I'll go ahead and introduce both, and then let them go in order to speak about their organizations before they combine their forces to give us more information about East Palo Alto and this project in particular. So first, I'd like to introduce Roxana Franco, who's the Environmental Justice Programs Manager for Nuestra Casa. I guess one of the best things I can say about her is the first time that I was in a meeting with her and she described her experience in East Palo Alto and particularly the problems with the water quality there. I had moist eyes and really felt compelled to do all that we can to support the work of Nuestra Casa. She's a brilliant advocate and speaker for the needs of her community. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Violet Sano, who's the Director for Climate Resilient Communities. And I think there's not much I can introduce. Once you hear her speak, I think you will be as enthralled as I am every time that I speak with her. I'm educated, I learn, I laugh, and I am inspired. So I look forward to both of these wonderful women speaking to you this evening. First, Roxana, would you like to tell us about yourself and your organization, please?
Hi, everyone. Roxana Franco, as James mentioned, Programs Manager in Nuestra Casa, so I oversee all the programs that we have going on. We've been around since 2002, so we're a small nonprofit, grassroots. We're a small team of 4 full-time staff, and then we have about 15 to 25 promotoras that are outreach workers in our community, so they disseminate information for whatever programs we have going on. I always like to say we seem like we're a little bit all over the place, but that's because we really go based off the needs of our communities. So whatever issues or need they have, we try and focus on it and try and help. One of our newer programs is our environmental justice program, which I helped start with our old programs director. And it started with water quality. As James mentioned, I always like to tell everybody the story of, I didn't think water was an issue. I'm from Napa, so moving from over here was a little bit of a shocker. Which lived in East Palo Alto, the water, I didn't realize how bad the water was, but it would make my eyes burn when I would shower. I started losing my hair. And then there's always like a white residue once you clean your pots. And I always thought I just didn't clean them enough. So I was always scrubbing, but it was always there. And it didn't happen until I went to a meeting where that was an issue among other community members. They're like, oh yeah, you have to boil water first to clean it, and then you do that. And I'm just like, that's a lot of extra steps for nothing. And so that kind of snowballed into us also doing our food distribution program. So we currently, pre-COVID, we used to serve 2,000 individuals. Now we serve close to 6,000 individuals, where we provide meals, fresh groceries to them. We do it at their homes. We do try and reduce the stigma of them having to go to a food pantry. And sometimes they're also only open during work hours. So we try doing the weekends in the evening, weekends in the mornings, and then evenings on Wednesdays. So we've been doing that. We have our EJ Parent Academy. Last year's Violet is one of our facilitators of one of our cohorts. We have 4 cohorts, which is the Latino cohort, Pacific Islander cohort, African American cohort, and a youth cohort. So those are all led by facilitators that represent each of these communities that are big in East Palo Alto. And we just talk about issues about environmental justice, climate change, sea level rise, water rights, transportation issues, health issues, because as we all know, all of this has an effect on everything. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We're gonna start our second round of it next week, next Wednesday. So we're excited, and yeah, it's a little bit about us. So nice to see you guys.
Thank you, Roxana. And Violet, please bless us.
Well, first of all, thank you all. It's an honor to be here tonight to share some of the work that we currently doing in communities like East Palo Alto. I'm the founder and director of Climate Resilient Communities. We started under Actera as a program, but 2020 during COVID, we decided to transition out because of the increasing need to work directly with communities in East Palo Alto and also North Fair Oaks, Bellhaven of Menlo Park. Climate Resilient Communities' main mission is to help elevate community voices, build community capacity through trainings, provide education and awareness, opportunities for not only the youth, the elderly homeowners, the African American community, very similar to the communities that Nuestra Casa serve, because most of the time these are the communities that live in EastPaloAlto, and unfortunately their voices are not heard, they're not present. And for example, last night was an overwhelming experience. For the first time, a lot of these communities, residents were able to, to join the meeting concerning the developments that Eileen graciously shared with you all. But Climate Resilient Communities, it's all about partnership and collaboration. We started this work because there was a lot of need, not only to connect the communities to their city, sharing the burden, but also communities, they are the ones who will be impacted by all these decisions. And when it comes to climate change and sea level rise, they are at the forefront. And so it was important for us to focus on increasing their capacity, increasing opportunities for them to be at the table, to be able to plan and to be able to respond to not only the existing climate change that we face now, but also the future projections. As Eileen mentioned, the issue with sea level rise, we already have an issue with water quality and water quantity in EastPaloAlto, for example. So we serve communities. Communities is our focus. And I'm very happy to be part of this. And also I want to take this opportunity to thank Sierra Club for the financial support that allows CRC, also our other partners to be on the ground, to raise awareness about the meeting that happened last night. And I think our efforts were very successful because last night was the only time that the city didn't have the capacity to, to engage more than 100 people. So I think, James, I don't know if you agree with me, but we have created chaos for the city. But I just learned a few minutes ago that they're going to host another meeting on Monday to talk about these same issues. But I'm happy to be here and looking forward to answer any questions about the Ravenswood Business District program.
Thank you for both of your organizations for supporting the phenomenal turnout last night. Susan, would you like to take over?
Yeah, so there's one question that came in the chat, and it actually came in before both of you started speaking. And that was a question is, how are community voices collected around a project like this? And I know that's a complicated question, but I thought each of you would probably be the best to try to answer that.
Yeah, Roxana, let me give a first go at this, and then maybe you can add on. So this has been, well, in 2013, the 2013 plan was, if I remember correctly, was also a lot of work. A lot of one of our community partner, YUCA, Youth United for Community Action, actually took the lead in engaging the community and representing community voices during this RBD planned in 2013. And then after that, throughout the, in EastPaloAlto, with all the different organizations working on the ground, like Roxana's mentioned, they have all these different opportunity to engage with residents and also homeowners. So a lot of that information is also being recorded during those consultations. For example, I would say one of the projects that Eileen mentioned, the waterfront project, Emerson Collective spent a year, even before submitting their plan, collecting information from the community about what to build on that site. They are the landowners, and they their strategy was to listen to the community and then plan. And so that's the proposal they came up with. But I do believe that a lot of the community were engaged during their process of planning. In other programming, like for example, ours, Climate Resilient Communities, we conducted community consultations around climate change, like sea level rise, what were the best strategies? And some of those strategies that came out of those community consultation reflects the same concerns that Eileen had. I really like that slide that Eileen put up there, like people want to bring nature back. They don't want a lot of development. They want to protect the ecosystems because of sea level rise, using ecosystems and natural habitat as the first buffer or as an adaptation strategy. So those things were obviously, recommended or prioritized by the community. And in last night, when I was listening to the meeting and watching the chats and everyone that were that were engaged in communicating last night, main issues that came up with that people didn't want this plan or the proposed scenarios, because first of all, one main issue in East Palo Alto still is housing, affordable housing. Communities in East Palo Alto are fed up with the impact from the Amazon project. These are past experiences, and even Facebook. And then just going through another proposal like this, those fears are still raw. That experience is still raw for them. So they're very much against this idea because there's not enough housing proposed. Also, the size of the buildings, they want to protect the environment and the ecosystem. They don't want to see skyscrapers. Traffic is already an issue. So a lot of the experience and the concerns from the community are lived experiences. So to them, that's what they're dealing with already, and seeing this kind of plan proposed will increase those impacts. And that's why, to me, my own observation last night was that a lot of the majority of the people didn't appreciate the scenarios that were presented.
Thank you.
Susan, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, the question was, and it came in during Eileen's talk, how are community voices collected surrounding these projects?
I think one of the big things, like at least at Nuestra Casa, one of the things we focus on is pre-COVID, we used to do a lot of focus groups. So, and by focus groups, we would give them incentives, as in like we pay for their time to be there because they are experts in their community. I know they might not think it, and I know sometimes we are not thought as that, but we are. We would offer them food, whether it be breakfast, lunch, or dinner. We'd pay for childcare, so that way they wouldn't have to worry about, okay, I can't go, but I want to go, but I have a child, so what do I do? So for us, it's more of creating a space to how to invite them over. It's making them feel safe. It's making our communities be heard and be seen, because what they say matters. It's also being able to provide material in a language that's culturally relevant to them, because oftentimes Violet knows that they don't have materials in Spanish or in other like Tongan or Samoan languages, and oftentimes our community members are older and they don't speak anything else besides their native tongue. So we have to be mindful of creating materials that they can be able to read and understand. And it's not just Google Translate. I know sometimes people do that and they have the best intentions and bless their whole heart, but that's not how we speak, and it's not a robot that, how we talk. And it's also being able to, I think it's also just being able to really go out there and do the work. Oftentimes, I know we have a good reputation with the community, and I think oftentimes consultants come to us and they expect us to do the work for them instead of them being able to show the face and be like, hey, this is what we're doing. Like, how can we partner? How can we get our voices there? How can we go door to door to meet people? Unfortunately, like Violet said, this last meeting was probably one of the most craziest meetings, but it was probably the first one where I saw so many people actually hear about this. And that's because of Violet's flyer with Yucca. Like if that didn't happen, I don't know what would have happened. And it's a big step because from the first meeting, we heard that it was door-to-door knocking 30 minutes before the meeting started. And it was only for like an hour. And that's not something you do. That's just showing a disrespect to community members who have been here for years and whose also voice matters. This is gonna affect them, like Violet said, you know. Housing is a big issue here. Displacement is a big issue here. And I know we call it affordable housing, but who's it affordable to? Because it's not for our community members, unfortunately. So how can we really implement projects? And it's also to like getting our youth involved. How can we do like, what is it called? Internships to get them to do stuff, because our youth are so active in environmental justice issues that sometimes they're not looked to. And I think that's also being able to create a window in a space to be able to go, hey, you guys want to create jobs for us, then work with our youth. Work with all our community members who have a lot to say. So that's a little bit.
Thank you, Roxana. There was another question that came in the chat, and this might be something that Eileen could address. So at first blush, it seems like raising a property 5 to 7 feet up in light of sea level rise might be a good idea. But why, I was going to ask Eileen, why might that be problematic?
Well, I mentioned that, and I didn't really go into depth during the discussion. The Harvest Properties put forward the idea of raising their entire site 5 to 7 feet because they said the levee is going to go up, and we want to bring our site up to the top of the levee so that people can see over it from any place. Of course, it's going to raise their buildings as well. And it also uses an enormous amount of dirt, and dirt is expensive, folks, and dirt can be hard to get. They can raise their buildings so that the building, and they can put garages under their buildings as being the bottom level and meet FEMA standards and handle the flood issues from that perspective. There's ways of doing it. They're building their buildings they build on pylons. So there's a lot of ways they can do that, and they can build, let's say, decks that run across the fronts of their buildings if they want to offer the public a chance to be able to look out across the levee. But at this time, they don't even know when that levee is going to be built. They don't know how high it will be because either the safer levee folks would not know because the numbers keep changing and we keep hearing more changes and a faster rising sea, and how tall should that levee be? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. So at this point, that concept, I suppose, is creative, but I don't think it is actually functional and not quite, and it also raises all that property above, that much more above the property of the homes
Right.
that are nearby. So that difference becomes evident.
Yeah. And that could create additional groundwater and flooding problems.
Yes, stormwater runoff.
So I would just wanted to open it up to anybody else. If you want to raise your hand or just chime in with a question, I'll just open it up.
Okay, there's some hands.
So Gita had a question to Violet and Roxanne. So do you want to explain your question, Gita?
Sure. I wanted to ask both of you, I've seen the videos, for example, Violet, the one that you were in, but I think KQED, when there was a lot of flooding in EastPaloAlto.
Yes.
And it seems like there's not been much discussion around that issue with these huge developments along the entire bayfront. Does that surprise you? Does that surprise you?
Yes, it does. It does surprise. Well, I know that there is a Safer Bay project that's ongoing in the planning process where it's managed by the San Francisco Creek Joint Power Authority. I do understand that they are talking to these developers and their proposed projects. I know that there is communication. The Harvest Project, I think last time I communicated with them, they were going to give some of their land to allow San Francisco Bay, the Safer Bay Project, to move forward with the alignment that was, in the planning process. But the community, the community are aware of flooding. We've had many meetings and community engagement around flooding. And like I said, that's why most of the time when you are talking to community leaders and residents, they want most of that place to to stay as it is, the open space that is available. That's why, what's coming out of the community is bringing, is restoring Cooley Landing, is restoring the Ravenswood open space so that it will act as a strong buffer against sea level rise. And so for EastPaloAlto, it's not just flooding from sea level rise, or there's also flooding from the San Francisco Creek, but because there was a levee built, so a lot of the protection has been provided for the fluvial flooding, but it's just the sea level rise. That's the target for the new Safer Bay project. However, there is still, even with those protection, EastPaloAlto is also vulnerable to intense rainfall. So there is flooding because the water doesn't have a place to go. And the existing infrastructure, the poor drainage systems that they currently have, the water pump station that doesn't work and doesn't have a capacity, those are the other contributing factors to the community's vulnerability to flooding. This whole place that we're talking about, RBD, is all under FEMA floodplain. So that's the other fact as well. All of this is already under, it's under FEMA floodplains, and it's already vulnerable to sea level rise.
I also just wanted to ask Roxanne, if I may, the same similar question, which is, if you're looking at the water quality in all of these wells, is that something, and it was a question in the chat too, has that come up as sort of, okay, here's a real problem the community has, the water. Is that, how do these projects solve our water problem? Is there, is that a community benefit that you're willing to, work on? It was a question someone raised, and I wondered about that.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, water infrastructure is going to be a big issue here. So what is it going to mean if they're going to triple the size of EastPaloAlto? What's it going to mean for our water? I know in the past, I think we had water shortages where we ran out of water like 2 to 3 times, and we don't have no emergency water. So what do we do, right? And we shouldn't have the same amount of water that we had like 40 years ago if our population keeps on growing. Is what can we do to be able to have more? If Palo Alto has more, Mountain View has more too, and it's to benefit them. So it's what can we do? I know, I think that's where a lot of communications and being engaged in these topics and in these conversations really do help. And it's how can we all come together and speak up? So with our EJ Academy, we've engaged our parents they're amazing leaders in their own, and they have literally gone above and beyond to attend these city council meetings, to advocate, to say, hey, this is an issue, what can we do to fix this? And they've done it in English, they've done it in Spanish, they've done it in Samoan and Tongan, and they are at these meetings every single time advocating for issues like this. And then it's okay, so what can we do though? What is something that's attainable, like a real attainable thing? I know it's a little, I think a lot of people are more nervous on what does it mean if it does go through, and like what happens to the water? If we run out of water again, if that's a thing, what does happen? We're trying to bring water testing here to our community, and we're trying to figure out, okay, so maybe it might not be that the water's bad, it might just be the pipes, right? So then how can we build new pipes? How can we build the infrastructure? Because from what I've been told, pipes are really old and they've been here for years. So what can we do to fix those issues?
Interesting. There's a community cleanup coalition that's been forming in Richmond, and I wonder if there might be some common ground there.
We've
I'd be
got
happy
some,
to pass that on to you. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
we've got some questions. I'll let Sheila go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate what your two organizations are doing. I think it's fantastic. What I'm curious about, just because I don't understand the mechanisms of how everything goes together, right? And I'm very curious if, for example, as community groups, because you have this terrible problem with the water, for example, can that be something, I'm not saying this is a good idea, but can that be something that you propose to the developers of, fine, replace all the pipes, improve the water pressure for this entire community, and then we'll consider, you know, if we really want to support this building kind of thing. Does that ever happen, or is that something that's, am I just making this up out of my own head? So thank you.
Well, the issue is the existing infrastructure that the city does not have enough funding to fix. So it's really, you know, it's the city's call. They are the one who are proposing criterias or whatever measurements they are giving to these developers. You know, there's a certain percentage of housing available, which I truly believe it's very small compared to the need of the community. When it comes to water, you know, as Roxana mentioned, you know, the supply of the water, you know, was very limited until I think Menlo Park or Palo Alto donated millions of dollars for EastPaloAlto to purchase water. The concern right now with the community is that many community and residents don't even want to give developers the opportunity to develop, right? They just don't want them there because already they are struggling with the supply of water. And if more building and more construction, it means more demand on the water resources that's already limited. But it is a good idea. I mean, last night, you know, just very similar to your thoughts, you know, we were talking about, you know, housing. Housing was the main issue. And then people were asking, there was one particular man who recommended, why not ask the developers to build housing instead of offices? I mean, housing is what the community need. Why are they proposing offices when EastPaloAlto need housing? I mean, that's a great point. Why isn't the city encouraging these developers to develop and build houses or housing infrastructure for the community that are, you know, that are threatened to be displaced? So it's the city council. Our role is to make sure that the community voices are heard. And we also work closely with the city council to understand the risk and the burden that the community already facing. And with addition of these new developments, that will extremely increase the impact, like what the community faced a couple of years ago with the gentrification from Facebook and other tech companies.
Yeah, thanks very much. I really don't want you to think that I think that swapping water for the buildings is the right thing. I want to, you know, absolutely not, you know, more room for birds. That's what I want. But I just was trying to understand the mechanism, and if you guys have the power essentially to try to do some kind of horse trading. But that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
I also want to add, it's a very complicated system, water system in EastPaloAlto. There are, I think, 3 or 4 different water sources and companies. And even until today, people are still struggling with overbuild from the water company that they get their water from. So a lot of underlying social issue and economic issues that the community currently face with the water supply and the water quality.
Thank you. Well, I think Fernanda had a question. She had her hand up a little while ago.
I did, and I asked it in the chat. Yeah.
Do you want to ask it here, or?
Yes, happy
Ask it
to.
in general. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like I don't know much about how all of this works, but if like most development projects will lead to change and will lead to, you know, more building and more traffic, which most communities would oppose, how do you think about, like, what kind of projects do we want in order to accommodate for, you know, population growth? Like, there are going to be more people in the world and jobs are being created, and how do you, like, what are you looking for in development projects to make it to accommodate change?
Roxanne and Violet.
Yeah, sure. I think the common, like, I guess the common want or the need of the community as of today. Yes, they do acknowledge that, you know, we still have to grow, we still have to develop, but also you have to remember that this is a community. It's only 2.5 square miles, right? 2.5 square miles, city limit, right now about 28,000 or 29,000 people. A lot of the you know, the developments around EastPaloAlto have deeply affected the community. You know, the gentrification, the increased cost of housing. You know, most of the communities living in, most of the residents, they work in the service industry. Many of them are caregivers. You know, the average median income is below $70,000. So those are the issues that the communities are more concerned about. Yes, development, you know, it's an option, but develop in a way that it doesn't displace the community. That's what the community are trying to say. We welcome development. We welcome the buildings if the buildings are for housing. We welcome these other office space if there's an opportunity for residents to own a piece of that development. Are you going to provide community spaces? Are we going to be able to own a restaurant in these developments? So these are the concerns of the community. The community are looking for opportunities for them to grow and to benefit, but not opportunities where people from outside, developers and people with money are going to come in, take over, and then at the end displaced a large portion of the population. So that's the conversation, that's the feeling. So if you are going into EastPaloAlto, and all you have to do is just listen to what the people are saying, because again, referring back to what I've said in the past, these are the people who still are feeling the impact of gentrification, the impact of COVID, the unemployment. These are the issues that they're worried about, keeping that roof over their head.
I just want to echo obviously what Violet said, but it's also one thing that has stood out to me since I moved out here was I remember we did a meeting and she came in from Oakland and she's from another organization and she came in through Palo Alto first. She's like, wow, Paul. She's like, oh, EastPaloAlto is so beautiful. She was driving and then she got to the Four Seasons Hotel and she's like, as she kept driving further, she was like, I thought that was all EastPaloAlto. I said, no. Can you imagine where EastPaloAlto starts? She's like, from the Four Seasons, doesn't it? I said, yes. She's like, what a difference in the greenery and the scenery that EastPaloAlto and Palo Alto have. And so one of the things I've also heard is, like Violet says, we're not saying no to the development. It's just there's already issues that we already have that we should be focusing on and fixing, like sidewalks. There's rarely sidewalks in EastPaloAlto, and I see moms with their kids, older folks walking, and they're walking with like cars right next to them. That's not safe. There's no lights, right? So when they're walking at night, it's pure darkness. So why can't we put all that money into those issues first and build up on it? I think those are also very important to focus on the stuff that we have going on before building up on it. And now we're displaced. I know of families that are like 4 families in the studio. 4 families to be living in the studio is crowded. I had me and my partner, and I thought that was a lot. So to think of 4 different families living in a studio because they can't afford housing is crazy to me. I know of families that are moving consistently to Modesto, but they still work out here, so they have to now commute, and they still rent a room in a garage because they stay here during the week and then they travel back for the weekend. Issues like that, it's things we should be focusing on and things we should be encouraging. And we're not saying no to the building. It's just, let's work on this first and listen to what the community wants. And I think that's also the message the community wants. All of these developments is like, who are you to tell us this is what we need when we have all these issues and we're telling you our needs and those aren't being met or focused on?
I think we have time for one more question. I appreciate your guys sticking with us longer than we probably told you. But I think Myrna had a question, so this will.
I just wanted to quickly compliment you on your neighborhood and the huge number of mature trees that it's clear that you as private citizens have maintained, and what a charming, beautiful town you have. If you get discouraged, just take a look at the huge number of just trees that you have. And I know your town is stretched, and I think it often wants to find money out of developers, which is short-term money. And developers never actually use their own money. They use the power of the community to draft bonds, to pay for bonds. And it's the gift would be if they were saying, yeah, we're going to help you trim all your mature trees and keep them healthy, do an assessment, all of that. But again, I'm not asking a question. I'm just really complimenting you on how beautiful your neighborhoods are. I went along Illinois Street, for example, a couple of weeks ago, and I fell in love with your town.
All right. Well, thank you,
I
Myrna.
did want to also add that you mentioned that EastPaloAlto is 2.5 square miles with 29,000 population. And I was just looking that Menlo Park has not many more, like 35,000, and it's 17 square miles. And I wouldn't be surprised if Palo Alto has the same sort of, spread out population. So it is interesting. And I very much appreciate Myrna's comment that there is charm in a tight-knit community. And there are things that are very positive about that, which other, suburban neighborhoods just don't have. They don't have that same sense of community that we feel in EastPaloAlto.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you, Kita, and the other speaker. We do have a lot. And I hear that you guys are planning to visit our area on Saturday. I also like to share that there is an event going on at Cooley. Don't be shy, feel free to join us. I'll be there. It's an Amatangi Polynesian Voices Youth Summit. We're also gonna be talking about sea level rise to the youth. And there's also other activities happening. So if you do come and there's a lot of people, don't be shy. You are all welcome to join us.
Well, thank you so much, Violet and Roxana, for participating with us. Your input's been very valuable to get your perspective. So we're going to have to turn the class to our first advocacy action, and that is for next week's class. We would like you to write a 50 to 100 word text as if you were writing to the mayor or city council of EastPaloAlto about your concerns about the proposed development that you've heard about. So this is something we'll do next week in small groups. We'll share. So in the following breakout rooms, I just want to encourage you to share your name and where you're from, and then what are the according to what you've heard tonight, what do you think are the top 3 issues for the community or for these developments? So we'll break into breakout rooms now.
Is Violet and Roxanne staying with us?
It's up to them.
into
You're
breakout.
welcome to stay.
I hope so.
Fortunately, I need to leave. I have my baby I need to put to sleep.
Okay.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thank you, Roxana.
Thank you.
And Susan, can you repeat the prompt one more time for us, please?
Okay, so yeah, it's what are the 3 issues that really resonated with you or concerns that you have about this development?
You're too far away.
Okay. But I want to thank you all for attending and participating tonight. So, and watch out for that Zoom link that I'll send for Saturday's outing. I'll send it tomorrow. I want to remind you our class next week is going to focus on wildlife and wetlands. And so we'll have a guest speaker, Shawnee Kleinhaus, who works for Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, and she's going to talk about the effect of light on wildlife. So I think that should be very interesting. So I would like to say take care, good night, and see you next week.
Thank you
But
for all your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone, and thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you.
See you, Eileen, on Saturday.
Chip, we'll see you tomorrow.